Laura Trott today proved once again why the Tories are absolutely clueless when it comes to defending their record and coming up with new ideas. Now, I get it, it's not going to be easy defending the full record that they have, but they do need to start trying learning from what lost them the election in the first place. One of those reasons was it's just simply blaming the war on Ukraine and the pandemic for everything. During her interview in Sky News today, yes, you guessed it, the whole reason the Tories were absolutely awful for 14 years was the pandemic. The pandemic's fault, the pandemic. It was clear by the end of their term they'd run out of ideas. They were running out of money fast and kept increasing taxes just to try and break even, so nothing was left over to get done. Now the new government have come in and they've started raising taxes where the Tories didn't want to touch, such as inheritance tax on the farming community, the VAT on school fees, cutting the winter fuel allowance for the most rich of society. So they can afford to do things if it wasn't for the fact that America have just elected an insane president. So we probably won't have the money that they were raising. It's all going to have to be now spent on defence. During the interview, even Phillips points out that they had 8 years leading up to the pandemic, so why wasn't the state reduced then? And she just gives this woeful answer of plans were just bedding in. The policy came in 2012. The pandemic didn't hit until 8 years later. It's embarrassing to watch. In my opinion, it could have been easily defended. Actions that make them actually look quite good as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, it would all be lies and nonsense, but at least you could spin it so it makes them sound like they were actually kind of competent. I mean, for the first few years, they could claim that they were cleaning up Labour's mess, which obviously is a lie, but people would buy it. Then they could say that they had the Brexit vote and they were concentrating on making sure that they delivered Brexit, and then the pandemic hit. So it's easy to do, but they just are like, oh no, it was all the pandemic's fault. So here is Laura Trott making an utter fool of herself.
Do you agree that the Tories just funked it?
No, I don't. The reforms that we brought in I think it was 2013, were well-intentioned, but it's clear
the
they
land
haven't...
reforms,
yeah,
disastrous.
They haven't worked in the way that they were intended to. But obviously we had the pandemic. It would be not, I think, the best idea to do a top-down NHS reorganisation directly after a pandemic. But I do agree in principle with what Wes is putting forward.
But you could have done it, couldn't you? You could have done some... I understand you couldn't have done it after the pandemic.
Exactly.
But you had, what, 8 years before then?
Yeah, but the reforms were just in and they were bedding. I think it was clear at that point...
No, you brought them in 2012, pandemic happened 2021.
2020. Yeah, exactly. But when they came in like 2013, I think. But it was just... What I'm saying is, yes, I agree with the principle. I think if we tried to do this after the pandemic, it would have been a disaster. So okay. I think it's right to wait.
All right. We're coming up to spring statement. The Chancellor will make her wishes known when it comes to welfare benefits. You were both Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Pensions Minister. Will you support cuts in disability benefits?
I think on the specifics, I want to wait to see what the government brings forward. But I think it's really important to remember that at the election, Labour said we could save no money from welfare. They've lost so much time when it was obvious to everyone that this was a benefit system that needed to be brought back under control post the pandemic. We'd taken some steps, which have been scored by the OBR, which is the kind of fiscal regulator, but there was more to do, and we had a plan at the election to do so. You
let 1 million extra people go on personal independent payments since the pandemic. You just let this thing run out of control.
Well, as I said, obviously the pandemic had an impact on the welfare system. I think everybody agrees with that.
No.
Everybody agrees that there were steps that needed to be taken to bring it back under control.
We're now up to nearly 3 million people.
Yes, we'd started that process.
Off.
Yes, we started that process before the election. It was in a number of our fiscal events.
You are now saying that the pandemic seems to be responsible for all the things you failed to do.
No, I think, Trevor, it's pretty unambiguous that the pandemic had an impact across our society in many ways.
Yeah, but you could have done something about this.
We were doing things about it, and we have further steps to take. We set those out at the election. The Labour Party rejected those. They said there was no money to be saved from welfare at the election. I remember that very clearly. They're now coming to it chaotically, too late, without a plan, just ahead of their emergency budget.
You can tell the Tories are out of ideas because they kept falling back on this failed Rwanda policy. And yet again, you can see Yvette Cooper shoot this one down in the video that's on screen now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button. And I'll see you in the next one.